The federal government is to launch a probe into the importation of adulterated petrol into the country, Minister of State for Petroleum Mr. Jamb Silva has said. This comes as the scarcity of petrol, which became noticeable 2 days ago, continued in Lagos and Abuja, with long queues characterizing the few filling stations that still had products to sell, despite assurances from the Nigerian Downstream Midstream Petroleum Authority and Prob that the trend would ease. Findings across filling stations in Lagos and Abuja yesterday revealed that the assurances from Prob failed to yield the expected results as motorists and other consumers complained of not having easy access to the product and spending hours at filling stations before being served. The development has equally led to a slight increase in the cost of transportation. A bus ride from Ikeja to Fagba, which usually costs N250, has now moved to N300, while from Ikeja under bridge to GRA, which hitherto costs N150, has now been jerked up to N200. Some of the commuters in separate interviews expressed frustration at the sudden hike in transportation cost, urging the federal government to, as a matter of urgency, arrest the situation before it gets out of hand. Also, the assurance by the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria meant to consumers that fuel would be available from yesterday, Wednesday, proved unrealistic, as queues at both independent and major fuel outlets persisted. Yesterday, oil marketers have estimated that about 100 million liters of contaminated petrol were imported into country by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited. However, Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Jamb Silva, addressing State House correspondents at the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja, said the government would launch a probe to unravel the cause of the crisis. He said the decision followed a briefing on the issue to President Muhammadu Buhari Tuesday with the aim of getting to the bottom of the matter. Speaking after the meeting of the Federal Executive Council, FEC, presided over by President Buhari at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, Silva cautioned against drawing conclusions before the investigation is completed. The issue did not come up in council, but of course, you will recall I was here yesterday to brief Mr. President on the issue. I'm not in a position to disclose the identities of the companies, but there are some issues and we are actively tackling it. Nobody has, before now, checked for methanol in our fuel. It's not very usual, and this is the first time this is happening, and NNPC is very much up to the task. I will also convey your question to NNPC and maybe the Midstream and Downstream Regulatory Authority. But we're actively handling it. And I want to assure you that the problem will be a thing of the past very soon. Sylvia also assured that the government would consider compensating those who may have been adversely affected by the bad fuel on possible sanctions for the erring companies. He said, I didn't expect you to rush to any conclusions. There will be a major investigation to unravel everything. And then let's really get to the bottom of it before we can come back and tell you what is going to happen to the culprits. We know that some people's vehicles must have also been damaged. That is also going to be taken into consideration in dealing with the situation. Airlines risk extinction as carriers operate below unit cost. Nigerian Airlines are in dire straits. This is because of the twin effects of the astronomical rise in the price of aviation fuel, Jet A1, the negative impact of foreign exchange fluctuations, and lack of government support for the aviation industry, said to be contributing 4% to Nigeria's gross domestic GDP. Many of the airlines are worried that Jet A1, which cost between N180 and N190 per liter in February last year, jumped to N400 per liter as of yesterday, according to the chairman of United Nigeria Airlines, Dr. Obara Okonkwo, who spoke to reporters yesterday at the Murtala Mohammed Airport, Lagos, said the current base fare charged by many of the airlines was no longer sustainable, an indication that airfares may rise on domestic routes because of the cost of aviation fuel. However, stakeholders have expressed concerns over the decision to hike fares on many of the domestic routes that can hardly sustain the airline's bottom line. Some of the stakeholders who lamented the high cost of Jet A1, which takes over 40% of the carrier's revenue, said the decision would force many air travelers to seek alternative means. Okonkwo said, for every ticket you sell, you have 5% in the ticket sales charge, TSC, directly to the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA. From the ticket, you pay the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, FAAN, and the Nigerian Aerospace Management Agency, NAMA. What remains to save the carriers from the situation, the airline chief said there is a need for special funding for the sector. He said, apart from tickets, salaries paid to staff have increased, costs have increased, but tickets have not increased that much compared to the cost of operations. Operators are looking for solutions to many of these things. We can't talk about safety without looking at rising costs. He warned that should Jet A1 rise to N500 per liter before March, then there will definitely be adjustments in ticket prices. Okonkwo said, the aviation industry will collapse. Airline business is the live wire of the entire aviation value chain. If airlines don't fly or they are comatose, NAMA, NCAA and FIN will not get the required revenue to run their operations. While seeking government's intervention in the provision of facilities at the airports to allow for longer operation of their equipment, he lamented that many of the aerodromes only do sunset operations, meaning that they can only operate into and out of the aerodrome at 6 p.m. The federal government has come under attacks from aviation stakeholders for failing to install critical infrastructure at the airports. They lamented that for several years, the majority of the airports cannot allow flights to land at night because they lack airfield lighting and instrument landing systems. For example, out of 22 airports under FIN, 18 do not have airfield lighting, so flights cannot land there after at 6:30 p.m. The United Nigeria Airlines said it is holding talks with other carriers on how to promote local interline that would cushion the effects of delay and cancellation to guarantee on-time departure. The first interline code-share deal between Dana and IBOM Air started late last year. The idea for domestic airline interline has been on the table for close to 20 years without any appreciable progress. An interline flight is an agreement between Airlines to coordinate passengers with an itinerary that uses multiple airlines without having to check in again or deal with their baggage at the stopover. While a codeshare agreement is where airlines operate flights on behalf of another airline using their flight code. It will be recalled that the federal government had in January 2021 granted Nigerian Airlines and $4 billion as part of intervention fund to help cushion the effects COVID-19 on their operations. Aside airlines that were helped with public funds, ground handling companies, National Association of Travel Agencies, aviation fuel marketers as well as airport car hire services partook from this largesse, although there was no specificity of who got what. In 2011, the federal government, through the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN), released $120 billion to the aviation sector. 10 airlines benefited from the fund through loans, with the tenure of 10 to 15 years. The loan was monitored by the Bank of Industry. However, some airlines, like Air Nigeria, Chanchangi Airline, First Nation, IRS, and Aide, have folded up, while other beneficiaries are Eric, Dana, Aero, Cabo, and Overland that are still in operation. In another news, Reps to Buhari imposed state of emergency on ritual killings. The House of Representatives yesterday asked the federal government to impose a state of emergency on ritual killings. The legislators also called on the National Orientation Agency, NOA, parents, heads of schools, religious leaders and the media to undertake a campaign to change the negative narrative bedeviling Nigeria. This followed the adoption of a motion sponsored by Deputy Minority Leader Toby Akachukwu, PDP, Enugu. In adopting the motion, the lawmakers also asked the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali Baba, to take urgent steps in increasing surveillance and intelligence gathering with the view to apprehending and prosecuting all perpetrators of ritual killings. They also ordered the Executive Director, National Film and Video Censors Board to rise to the mandate of the agency as the clearinghouse for all movies produced promoting ritual killings. Akachukwu said ritual killings have assumed an alarming rate in recent times. He said, the upsurge in reported ritual killings, with increasing cases of abductions and missing persons in different parts of the country, which in most cases, the culprits also rape, maim, kill and obtain sensitive body parts of unsuspecting victims for rituals. Further notes that the Red Cross Society in 2017 reported that it received 10,480 reports of missing persons in Nigeria. Aware that on January 22, 2022, 2 teenage suspects and a 20-year-old reportedly killed one Sophia at Kehent and had her head severed and burnt in a local pot in Abeokuta, Ogun State. Further aware that the death of Sophia has attracted national outrage and condemnation considering the ages of her killers. Also aware that the merchants of such wicked acts often use social media as a ready tool to advertise their evil behaviors. The motion was unanimously adopted with the Committee on Police Affairs and Information and National Orientation to investigate and report within 4 weeks. Medical tourism, reps in drama show as new bill prescribes 7 years jail term and 500 fine for public officers. A mild drama yesterday ensued at plenary in the House of Representatives during the debate on a bill seeking 7 years jail term or a fine of $500 million or both for public officers who seek medical treatment abroad as public expensive. A member of the House, Ibrahim Isiaka APCO Gun, who seconded the motion for second reading of the bill, later withdrew the motion, sensing controversies in the debate. The proposed piece of legislation is essentially an amendment to an existing act of the National Assembly. Titled A Bill for an Act to Amend the National Health Act, 2014, and for Related Matters, HB 1611, the bill is sponsored by Sergio Sogan, who represents as in North and as in Southeast Federal Constituency of Aide State. Hardly had Ogun offered the synopsis in the lead debate of the bill than Isiaka raised a point of order on personal privilege, saying he was withdrawing his motion. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting me this special privilege. I regret to withdraw my secondment to the bill moved by Sergio Ogun." Mr. Speaker, colleagues, what I heard is quite different from what he is postulating. Because of that, Mr. Speaker, before it is thrown open for further debate or before you rule, I withdraw my secondment, Mr. Speaker. This was, however, novel to the House and therefore a surprise to many members, as no one in the history of the Parliament has ever done that. Though his reason for withdrawing the second motion was not understandably explicit, the lawmaker, however, left the subtle feverish feelings that the bill was against the House and would in earnest, when passed into law, stop most members from embarking on medical tourism abroad. The withdrawal caused some laughter in the chambers. Sadly, the Deputy Speaker, Idris Weiss, who presided over the plenary in his ruling, said their law did not have any provision for withholding his motion. Well, Isiaka, I regret also from the chair to tell you that once you second a motion, there is no provision in our law for you to withdraw. Thank you very much, Weiss ruled, hitting the gavel. Earlier in his lead debate on the general principles of the bill, Ogun said he was not making a new proposal but an amendment to an extant law passed by the National Assembly stopping public officers to seeking medical treatment on the account of taxpayers' money. He however said that the law did not provide for any form of punishment, hence the amendment. He added that the new bill prescribed 7 years jail term, an option of $500 million or both as punishment. The lawmaker said, the objective of this bill is to amend the Principal Act so as to make provisions for sanctions against any public officer who violates the provision of that Act, especially Section 46 of the Act, that provides that without prejudice to the rights of any Nigerian that seeks medical attention abroad, investigation or treatment anywhere within and outside Nigeria, no public officer of the government of the Federation or any part thereof shall be sponsored for medical checkup, investigation or treatment abroad, at public expense except in exceptional cases on the recommendation and referral by the medical board, whose recommendation and referral shall be duly approved by the minister or commissioner of the state as the case may be. Mr. Speaker, this is the act as passed by the National Assembly in 2014. At this juncture, Weiss surprisingly retorted this assembly made a provision that nobody should travel for medical attention. Responding, Ogun said, I read the act and the Gazette is here. I wasn't in this assembly then. This is the law today. So what I am basically doing with my amendment is saying that there should be punishment which the act did not capture. The amendment is in Section 1, which says any public officer of the government of the Federation or any part thereof, who violates the provision of Section 1 above shall be guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to a fine of $500 or an imprisonment term of 7 years. I am only trying to cure the defect in the law because there is no punishment for flouting it. That's basically what has brought it, let alone the decay in our health institutions or the capital flight. There is an act but no punishment for violating the act. There is no sanction. Contributing to the debate, the Deputy Minority Leader of the House, Toby Akachukwu, said the bill, when passed into law, will check the capital flight from Nigeria on the account of medical trips by public officers and give boost to the fixing of the country's health sector. Similarly, Tajuddin J. Yusuf, PDP, Kogi, also asked members to support the bill on its merit. I have gone through this proposed bill and it's very clear that there is an act of the National Assembly that made this an offense already. This bill is not seeking to initiate that. What it is doing is an amendment to an existing act that there is a gap. That act does not proffer punishment for those who flout an existing act. So, what it's bringing is an amendment to an act. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal that what we should do is to look at the amendment. An act says something is wrong but there is no punishment. The essence of the Parliament is to look at the shortcomings in our laws and fill it. Mr. Speaker, dear colleagues, I appeal to us to consider the bill on its merit. It's an amendment, Yusuf said. The bill, when eventually put to voice vote, received massive support of the yay-sayers, outweighing that of the nay-sayers. It was later adopted for second reading. Jamb ex-registrar operated date phony firms, says Aide. A federal high court in Abuja was, on Wednesday, informed how a former registrar of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, Professor Aide, allegedly floated date companies, purchased 3 buildings and bank shares through his cronies while holding a public office. The companies, 2 duplexes and a bungalow, and bank shares were said to have been acquired by Aide when he was the chief executive of Jamb. A witness, Peter Owole, made the revelations while testifying for the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission in the N5.2b and corruption charges against Aide. The witness, who was a legal advisor to the ex-Jamb registrar, admitted that he incorporated the 8 companies and purchased the 3 houses for Aide as his client on oral and written instructions. The companies are Okafin Boys and Girls Hostel Limited, Sapati International School, Doan Ogbai Petroleum Limited, Chang Marbles Limited, Stanot Institute Limited, Trillion Learning Center Limited, Grace Petroleum Limited, and Ifladun Communications Limited. The certificates of incorporation of the companies and the title documents of the 3 buildings allegedly purchased for the defendant in Abuja were tendered and admitted as exhibits by the court. Owole, who was led in evidence by the ICPC counsel, Ebenezer Sogun, claimed to have been called to the Nigerian bar in 1999. He told Justice Obayo Iganiwanta that the companies were floated in the names supplied to him by the defendant. Owole testified that Aide was registered as a director in 2 of the companies, while his cronies were used as directors in the rest, adding that he'd never met any of the cronies at the time he was using their names at the Corporate Affairs Commission. The cronies used to register the companies, according to him, are Aide Dale, Aide Alumide, Awadeo Habib, Anajug Benga, Aide Lutoyan, Aide Kanbi, Aide Dale, Olayola Ayanwe, Ibrahim Dan Musa, and Sanusi Allah Najim, among others. Owole said the receipts obtained in the course of transactions for the defendant were received and acknowledged in writing on behalf of the ex-registrar by his son and a serving member of the House of Representatives, Olumide Aide. The witness, who claimed to be an indigene of the same town, Igbo with Aide, denied registering companies for the defendant to blackmail him, adding that everything he did was on the instructions of the defendant. To buttress his point, the witness tendered 12 letters exchanged between him and the defendant as well as 17 photocopies of bank drafts issued for his payment for the registration of the companies and the purchase of the 3 buildings. The 17 photocopies of the bank drafts allegedly delivered to him by one Dr. Jim Olabizi, a former director of finance in Jamb, were admitted as exhibits. The witness further told the court that Aide acquired millions of shares in Innocent Microfinance Limited in addition to being a director in the firm at the time he was Jamb registrar. However, Aide's counsel, Ibrahim Ishiaku, SAN, could not cross-examine the witness on the grounds that several documents tendered and admitted as exhibits were not part of the proof of evidence supplied to him. The lawyer applied for an adjournment to enable him to obtain the documents and carefully study them. Due to no objection by the ICPC counsel, Justice Iganiwanta fixed April 4 and 5 for the continuation of trial. The anti-graft agency had last year slammed 18 charges against Algerin bordering on alleged diversion of public funds to the tune of N5.2 bn.